Spoiler warning for the entirety of the MSQ. I have been playing Final Fantasy XIV for, my day subscribed says, 1,200. I started playing all the way back near the end of Shadowbringers. However, I made the cardinal sin of 14. I rushed the story. I should explain. My MMO history at the time was Destiny 2, if you can really count that, and my first ever look into the game wasn't an emotional scene or a story beat, no one singing its praise. It was a random video that popped up on my YouTube from Drac Gamestein, his EA Desk video to be precise, and it looked like some of the most fun you could have in a video game. So, my goal was never to enjoy the story, nor explore the world. It was to beeline it straight to the endgame like I'd done with D2. And, as it turns out, raiding has been some of the most fun I've ever had. EX1 and 2 were a blast. I liked EX1 so much I still have it memorized to this day. And my first hurdle approached, P1S. Ever since I first stepped foot into that arena, I haven't looked back. From switching over to NA, finding an FC, and clearing some of the hardest fights in the game, I never regretted a thing. Until P11. I watched as two of my static members would fangirl over this character I had very little knowledge of. They loved this character so much I had to see what was going on. So, I tried to watch a couple character breakdowns, and I stopped. As soon as they started going into deep lore, 2 minutes into a 30-minute video, I knew I would need to experience it myself properly. I remembered some bits and pieces, but I would have to start again. From the beginning. Ul'dah, home of the merchants, a rotten, spoilt cesspit of the worst of capitalism, and my new home. I started as a pugilist. I wanted to try doing something else. I had been tanking for nearly 2 years at that point, handing out pretzels and tea, bumping into the bloody Sultana of all people, and getting to meet Thancred. I have opinions on this fella, but I'll get into them later. Bumbling about Thanalan, doing odd jobs, helping the locals, I made myself busy with minor side quests to bump my level. I had come back to JP, OCE being dead as a doornail, and I didn't have the road to 90 now, I think, I had been so accustomed to. Side quests in this game are a weird mix of worthless drivel and really engaging pieces of world building. Here in Western Thanalan, the main side quest chain is all about the less savory parts of the mercantile greed of Ul'dah, a group of hired thugs trying to push the locals out of their homes so that someone else can come in and take over the bazaar. The world, at least for now, doesn't revolve around me. People suffer and struggle. You might be able to ease some of that suffering, but the world will continue to spin. Maybe it's just me, but I find that moving. The game doesn't want you to save the world, not yet at least. This is a JRPG, we'll get there, I'm sure. But it does want you to see the people of the world, to hear what they say, feel what they do, and think about how you can help them. They may just be side quests, small things to skip over, but strangely, that is part of the message as well. These troubles are not something you really need to worry about, not something to contemplate if you don't want to. Nothing much of interest is happening in the MSQ, and I'm starting to wonder if I've been lied to. But I knew about P11. I knew good things were coming. Honestly, that's the biggest issue I, and as it turns out, so many others have with the first part of 14. Patience is mandatory. Most people are going to have an immediate turnoff if you tell them, it gets good after 50, 100, 150 hours. It's just not a good first impression. I made it through this twice because I had reasons to both times, but others won't. The Stolen Crown questline is next, and aside from learning more of the Ascian, I don't have much to say about it. Attending the banquet, General Rauban notices me collapsing in a corner and asks me to deliver missives to the other two leaders of the Eorzean Alliance. And with that, the Ul'dah-specific story is done. The tale told is one of corruption, greed, and stupidity. People doing anything and everything to get one up on each other. And although it's a tale old as time, it's also very indicative of the time it was released. Although ARR was released in 2013, the world was written for a 2010 initial release. In its development time, people got to witness the world's greed, how bad things could be for the people not at the top, and what people had to do to survive. Ul'dah is the culmination of that. It feels strange and almost cheesy nowadays, but for the time it was having not necessarily a profound, but a pointed message. I think that's something a lot of people have forgotten. The game is almost 15 years old. How things were told and what they were saying will have been influenced by many of the events of the time, and how we see it now will differ. Up next is my favorite little detour. I call it the D&D section. The game just finding random problems in the world for you to try and help with. The pirates of Zastasha, the cultists of Tamtara, and the giants of Copperbell. None of these are particularly worrisome events. If you didn't get there first, the Grand Companies or another group of adventurers would have sorted it out, a few of which follow along. You can chat to them at each location and learn a bit about them and what happened to them inside the dungeons. This is by far my favorite part of coming back to do it all again. The MSQ may be long and a tad boring, but it's all made up for by the life the random side NPCs bring to the world. Each of them has clearly lived their own lives and made their own way through the world. Interacting with them is, again, optional, but I would highly recommend it for anyone trying the MSQ again. And finally, once we have completed these few dungeons, we get a proper introduction to the almost full roster of the Scions. And I really don't like them. Don't get me wrong, they are properly realized characters. The writing is great. They are just all, with a couple exceptions, massive dicks. Thancred sucks as a person. He is that annoying bastardization of the James Bond trope. Suave, competent, and a right prick. Everything he does must be done to show off. Everything he says must be to further his way into a lady's undergarments. And never once does he actually care about me. Not me the player, but me the character. Papalymo is the arrogant scholar. None can be beyond his ken, and if they are, it's because they're cheating. He will always have the last word if Y'shtola hasn't beaten him to it. His words are always there to undermine what someone else has said, or to belittle his companion Ida. Y'shtola is the other side of the same coin, just with the snark dialed up to 11. Not a single interaction with her seems to be genuine or positive in any fashion. Bossy and immature at times, she thinks she knows the right answer for every situation. We haven't met him yet, but I just despised Alphino for most of ARR. I called him Little Lordling whenever I referenced him in my notes. Who thought it would be a good idea to give the 15-year-old know-it-all power equal to the Grand Companies? And he is the worst when it comes to how he treats the PC. He has done naught but treat me like the weapon he sees me, a thing to launch at the problems in front of him. Urianger isn't great, but he's not bad either. I feel sorry for him, at best, due to events yet to come, but he just isn't there most of the time. I have similar opinions on Ida. She's always playing second fiddle to Papalymo, and the ditzy airhead has never been a favorite character trope of mine. The only members of the Scions whose company I enjoy is Minfilia and Tataru. I actually enjoy the company of these two because they care. They actually care about the well-being not only of themselves, but of me and everyone around them. When things go wrong, they try and console everyone, and when things go right, they celebrate. They are always there to help or to do right by the world. No snark, no subtle jams, just an honest attempt at fixing the issues they see in the world however they can. How Minfilia ever became friends with the rest of the Archons, I'll never know. Back to the MSQ, and learning about the Echo, a semi-recurring phenomenon used to explain our ability to see into the pasts of those around us for purposes of exposition, as well as our ability to communicate, no matter the language barrier. It also, most helpfully, wards us against the mind-altering influence of the primals, great beings brought about by fervent prayer and an abundance of ether. usually in the form of crystals. They take the shape of their devotees' greatest wishes and bend all around them into a never-ending cycle of ether consumption and tempering. Our first mission is to investigate the recent robberies and disappearances around Eastern Thanalan. Here is where we come to first encounter a recurring theme throughout 14: religion. The people of Camp Drybone are unwilling to discuss the recent events with me, and Isambard believes the only ones they would talk to are the good men of the cloth. A little more digging, and we find that an unscrupulous character has been disguising themselves as a member of said cloth to abduct people for the Amalja, a group of lizard people who worship Ifrit, the Lord of the Inferno. And for quite possibly the most jarring detail possible. Reporting back to Minfilia, she asks us to go and speak with a random goblin in Central Thanalan to discuss materia. I know they cut a lot of questing out over the years to speed things up, but this is absurd. Now, back to our regularly scheduled programming. Getting captured by the Amalja after a sting operation gone wrong. The Lord of the Inferno is summoned as a great orb of flame rising into the sky, reaching to block out the sun. I could wax lyrical about the Primal's entrance, and I will. It's my video. Blocking out the sun is not just a cool effect, it's also quite possibly the most symbolic thing any of the Primals do. It represents how they affect the people around them, blocking out the natural and replacing it with the artificial, smothering the soul of the world and putting its own in its place. The fact the Amalja see him as the sun is another facet of this summoning. The sun is often a deific symbol, so it fits, but the sun is supposed to provide for all. It helps the crops grow, it scares away the storms, but this one is corrupted. Blazing with heat that only the Amalja could cope with, it causes drought and death. The world would shrink away from this god, and that's what it wants. Ifrit's design is another subversion of the deific nature of the sun, a demon-like visage emerging from the godly ball of flame, using nails to pin itself to the world and last forever. Nothing about this thing is benevolent. The fight itself is pretty simple. Hurt the boss, kill the nails, then finish things up. And we move on. A newly born icon slayer, and with great reputation, many come looking to use it. The grand companies have sent their envoys and eagerly await which one you will align yourself with. I chose the Immortal Flames and got to rep my home city. Also, Rauban is the best general so far. Away to rescue Biggs and Wedge, the bestest boys, and our first real introduction to Garlemald, the overreaching imperial nation far to the north. Having conquered most of the rest of the world, it turned its sights on Eorzea 5 years ago, just before the Calamity. Now the 14th Legion and the Black Wolf are here to finish what they started. The designs of the base Garlean troops is one of my favorite bits of silent world building. They are dressed from head to toe in black and red of Garlemald, but it's the clothes and the cloth that strike me the most. They wear a slightly altered version of a low-level dungeon gear called the Ascetic from Todorak. It is cheap, shabby, and not particularly protective. It looks like I could cut through it like margarine. The helmet is a custom design, but it too shows its shabbiness. A pot helm made of leather and kept together by a few studs, a small mask to obscure what little individuality they had left. Now, obviously, this wasn't intended, this was just resource saving, but it means the world to me as someone who looks at these weird little bits. Their armor shows how they are treated. Not very well. And the dichotomy of these poor draftees running around with naught but a thin layer of cloth, whilst they work alongside behemoths of metal and machina, their officers sporting essentially power armor. Clearly, the foreign corps are so beneath the sights of the mighty Garlemald, they forgot to give them actual armor. Now, I'm going to perform the cardinal sin again and skip some shit. Genuinely, for the next 10 levels, nothing happens. Unless you're really invested in Ursendel, and I reckon you probably don't know who that is. At level 30, we get our first sort of rising tension. Titanus back, the kobold primal lord of crags, and so we must stop him. That's what the Scions do. To do so, we must request aid from the Company of Heroes, a group of brave adventurers who have battled Titan before. Our first lead on their location is a tractor in Lower Lenosia. If I had the option to shoot just one character in this game, it would be him. My irrational hatred of him eclipsed only by my hatred of the goblins. After being led around for a bit, we finally meet the real captain of the Company of Heroes. And so begins one of the most divisive questlines in ARR, the Banquet questline. It only lasts for 4 levels, but each of those can be torture for some. A meaningless side quest at each turn whilst we are watching the ticking time bomb that is Titan. And at the end, Weisgert reveals that each task was a way to test a part of my worthiness. It almost seems like the quests were designed to piss people off on purpose. And if that's the case, I must applaud the writers. They pull it off fabulously. But generally, you don't want to piss off most of your player base halfway through their playtime. I'm no game dev, but you know. The summoning of the Lord of Crags is one encased in far more explicit text compared to Ifrit, but it is no less relevant. Titan has been summoned this time due to the sins of the people of Lenosia. They have broken a covenant formed between the two societies and encroached into Kobold lands. And now we have defiled a sacred place. Ignoring for a second the fact the Kobolds are summoning the equivalent of a tactical nuke, they are the ones in the right here. Man's greed has caused this, and the Kobold's anger is righteous. It's especially poignant given current times. Who here is truly in the wrong? The initial aggressors, the escalators, the overreaching foreign power? All I know is that innocent people will be killed, and that needs to be stopped. Here, we get a glimpse of Garlemald's plans. Something about the power of the icon has excited the one called Nero, a device he is working on which might be able to win the war with Eorzea. It is also revealed here that Garlemald is working alongside the Ascians, our black-robed adversaries who seem responsible for most of the problems we've had to clear up over the last 35 levels. I return home to the Waking Sands with good news, only to discover our friends had fallen to a particularly grisly fate. Livia Sass Junius has raided the Scions' home base and executed all but a few. Here is where the emotions first began to surface whilst I played this game. I had been interacting with each of the NPCs here in the Sands and listening to their stories. Liaverne struggling to make things right after what happened to her party and Avir's death. Abatia and Orly becoming quick friends with Arenvald. Una, Perseverance, and Sadsflow struggling to prove themselves to people who had forgotten them. And all these stories had been cut short. People I had been getting to know and whose presence I had delighted in having each time I returned. I may not have cared about the world, but I was definitely going to put a blade through her heart, no matter what it took. Stalked by Garlemald all throughout, we go to bury our dead in the Lich Yard and beg succor of the goodly priest there. And so we are acquainted with Alphino Leveilleur. We had bumped into him a few times before, but this is our first formal meeting. I've already made my thoughts on him clear, but just to emphasize, he barges in, basically gaslights Cid into remembering who he is, declares himself a Scion, and basically drags us into another fight with a Primal. I would have fought the Primal anyway. It has become something of my job, but the arrogance with which he essentially demands that we follow him to slay Garuda, it does not put one in a predisposition to like the lad. We are to find the Ironworks ship, the Enterprise, Cid's pride and joy before the calamity, and so we must travel to Kurthus, land of ice, snow, and a lot of dragons. I learn about the heretics, as well as Ishgardian obstinacy. At every turn when I offer help or ask for information, I am turned away or dismissed as a non-believer. The few who do try to help do so under their breaths or behind their superiors' backs. House Durandare, at least, does not care for me much. Through our trials, we find a draconic rosary in a chest belonging to Lord Francel of House Helenart. The captain of the guards we have been working with believes this to be an act of heresy, but his fellow could not fathom Lord Francel as a heretic. He bids us warn the Lord in Skyfire locks. After passing through the locks and speaking with Lord Francel, a most cinnamon roll man I could never conceive of, we met of Lord Rochefort of House Forton, a kind soul who offers to assist us in our quest, and who comes to be a stalwart ally. The two young lords we have met so far here in Curthus are an exception that prove a rule. The Ishgardian people are no one's friends, not even their own. Inquisitors stalk the land, executing at the hint of heresy. The knights and the people of the land turn away if you are not Ishgardian yourself. They are a people who, through 1,000 years of protecting themselves from a seemingly never-ending evil, become something of an evil themselves. Insular, angry, and constantly hostile. Religious fanatics are nothing new in Final Fantasy, but these ones are different. They are an almost prophetic look at the drawn-out wars of the real world and the people who engage in them. I need to know where Ishikawa keeps her scrying mirror, because it has a near-perfect run rate. Now, as our investigation into the whereabouts of the Enterprise bear no fruit, we come to find Lord Francel getting desperate. The Inquisitors are on his case, and he must prove himself, somehow. So he and a small contingent of knights have gone to the Steel Vigil, a nearby stronghold overrun by the dragons. He has gone to slay as many as he can, yet we find him as he is about to be slain himself. In order to continue our investigations, we must assist Lord Francel in clearing his name, and Lord Rochefort has a plan. The only way such a rosary could have found its way into a shipment for House Helenart is if it was tampered with. Questioning the porters, his suspicions are confirmed, and we rush to halt Lord Francel's trial before it is too late. The trial itself is happening at Witchdrop, in the same vein as the old witch trials of medieval times. It is either prove yourself a heretic by surviving a fall, or die from the drop and be welcomed into Halone's halls. A gruesome test with no basis in reality, but these are not realists. They are religious nuts, and this makes perfect sense to them. Rescuing the young lord is no easy task, as one of the temple knights is a heretic in disguise. Transforming himself into a dragon, he takes about trying to kill me, whilst the Inquisitor watches on. He is only a dragon, though, and I have bested creatures far more imposing than that. As the rescue winds down, I continue my search for the Enterprise. A witness Rochefort has found relays that it fell near the Stone Vigil and would have been taken inside by the regiment. We are tasked with recruiting the aid of Lord Drummond of Whitebrim Front, as House Durandare has sealed the vigil due to a dragon infestation. But once again, Ishgard raises her steely walls, and we can find no assistance in Whitebrim. At every turn, the Inquisitor Guillaume arrives to inform the people that we have interrupted his investigations. It seems that we may have pissed him off. The only way Lord Drummond is going to listen to us is if the Inquisitor can change his tune. We ask around the outpost, looking to find out more about the Inquisitor, only to find a mystery afoot. A mismatching tale leads us to find a body at the base of a nearby chasm, a bloody encyclical entombed alongside a body who looks identical to the Inquisitor. An imposter has taken the form of the Inquisitor, and wielding the religious fervor and absolute trust of the locals has damned many an innocent to their death. With evidence and witness in hand, I bring truth to the Lord, and we go to confront the imposter at Snowcloak. Once again, dragons are far lesser than the creatures I have slain, and once the imposter has breathed his last, we are given permission to enter the Stone Vigil. The dungeon itself is a light jaunt through Ishgardian ruins, slaying dragons as we go. But at the end, we finally come face to face with one of the leaders of the Ascians. La Habrea. He has been following us in our travels and believes we are an amusing thing to watch, but not that we are a threat to him. Returning to Gridania with Enterprise in tow, I can give my closing thoughts on the Kurthus questline. It is by far the best in base ARR. The characters are the most fleshed out, the struggles of the people make sense, and their actions throughout are warranted. And the most impressive thing, none of the little side objectives feel like detours. They all make sense as they are happening. The obstacles are clear and the way to get through them explained well, but it doesn't hit you over the head with the explanations either. They are there for you to infer, but written subtly in the text. Maybe I'm starting to grow an MMO brain, but this was a really pleasant bit of storytelling. I've already mentioned my inference of the real-world influences, but I'll go a bit deeper here. Ishgardians, for me as a Western man, are a reflection of the war on terror in the Middle East. They are the people corrupted by the influence of propaganda and jingoism. All they really want to do is protect their home, but they have been forced into the mud that is evil. From an Asian point of view, and I'm not Asian, so I'm kind of making this up, kind of deducing, Ishgard's closest equivalent would be North Korea, a dictatorial state hooked on a national religion, finding any excuse to execute those who disagree. Their fervor is internally righteous as they seek to defend themselves from those who destroy their way of life. But that way of life is destroying them in turn. Garuda, Lady of the Vortex, has summoned a massive storm that acts as an ethereal barrier around her domain. To destroy it, we need the power of the corrupted crystals. And we go from the best storytelling in the game back to near enough the worst. I'm going to skip this bit again, as it's just being led around by a bunch of eggheads with their nose up their professor's arse. Garuda's summoning reveals little to none about the woes of the Ixal, and she herself is only a reflection of their sadism. Screeching the details of how she will lay our corpses, there is none in her that could redeem the Ixali. I'm not entirely sure what happened with her. She has the most character and is the last of the primals, yet she says so little about the beastmen who summoned her or the world she was summoned for. The smallest thing I could possibly get is that the vortex barrier could represent their need for protection. But the Ixal are always shown as an expansionist society, always on the assault. It just feels weird after the other two said so much. After laying low the Lady of the Vortex, she is brought back to strength by the prayers of the Ixali, and the other beastmen who were captured have begun the summonings of their own primals. As all three bear down on us, we are interrupted by the arrival of Garlemald, their new device of war hanging low from their airship, the Ultima weapon. It feasts upon the flesh and ether of the primals and grows stronger with each, its body twisting and morphing as it adopts characteristics of those it consumes. We are forced to flee, with Gaius mocking us as we run. The Empire could not have found a more fitting weapon for its foreign legion. Growing stronger as it sups on the life of others, turning things of reverence into weapons of war. It stands as the ultimate symbol of Garlean expansionism in its mockery of what others hold dear, whilst never truly being designed by the Garleans themselves. Our battle with Garlemald's 14th Legion starts proper, beginning with us rescuing our companions from their holdings in Castrum Sentry. Our plan is a simple one, but it ends up having a lot of moving parts. We disguise ourselves as Imperials and, while snuffing their radio communications, sneak our way onto the base with the aid of a captured Magitech Reaper. It's a good thing Livia had been dragged away by plot things before we began. If she had been there, I would have smashed the game's code to bits and killed her myself. But for the stability of the game, she wasn't, and so the plan goes ahead with but a minor hitch. Gaius appears to demonstrate the Ultima weapon to the rest of the Scions, and an Ascian appears beside him. Thancred, revealed to have been La Brea all this time, or so the game would like me to think. Unfortunately, I have finished the game before, so I knew it wasn't him. But to someone brand spanking new, this could have been a twisting reveal, if only Thancred was someone you could care about. Dispelling the doubts from our leaders' minds, we set about forming Operation Archon, a multi-step plan aiming to cut Castrum Meridianum off from its fobs near the city-states and strike a telling blow against the Ultima weapon. Rittertin Sas Arvina is the first tribunus to fall. He is the ideal the Black Wolf strives towards, one of the good ones. A member of the Foreign Legion who through loyalty and competence has clawed his way to the top of the ladder. Unquestioningly loyal to Gaius, he promotes the same loyalty in his men. Those who had mocked him or belittled him showing up as he dies to protect him no matter the cost. He is the unattainable goal of the 14th Legion, and it is laughable. Outside of his direct officers and Gaius, he is still the black sheep, only tolerated because he was Gaius's favorite pet. A tragedy, really. He could have been someone, done something truly extraordinary outside of the Empire, but he chose to dig himself deeper, and now he is dead. Livia Sas Junius is the next to fall, and I would relish in her death a little longer. She is a sociopath. I believe the Japanese term for this is yandere. She had come to love the idea of Gaius Van Baelsar so much, she'd become irrationally jealous of the Warrior of Light for taking even a second of his attention from her. She had slaughtered so many and done despicable things in the name of her obsession. She sees no wrong or right, only what will get her closer to Gaius, and that obsession is what killed her. She died trying to protect the man who could give a rat's ass about her, and she deserved it. Nero Tolskeva, our first battle with a true blue Garlean noble, a tosspot by any other name. Jealous of his time in the academy with Cid, he has striven to outdo him no matter what. That led him here, to the 14th and the Ultima weapon. He is, also, a coward. His veneer of brilliance hides a deeply jealous man who will do anything to one-up Cid in this one-sided rivalry, anything except actually putting himself in danger. He flees at the slightest sign he may lose the fight. Gaius Van Baelsar, a man with a vision, a twisted, warped view of the world, dictated by his life in the Empire with no knowledge of the outside. He lives by might make right. But only the Empire is mighty. Only he is strong enough to rule Eorzea and its fractured people. He cares not for the traditions or the lives already lived. They are weak, pathetic, and he would do away with them. He ignores everything in front of him, every evidence that could argue against his ideals. The fall of Bahamut, our slaying of the icons, the unification of the city-states, the 1,000 years of war that Ishgard has survived. None could possibly compare to the providence his rule would bring, ignoring the strife he has caused in his wake. And he has the weapon to do it with, the Ultima weapon, empowered by the primals it gorged upon, unleashing its greatest spell at the whims of the Ascian La Brea. It craters the Garlean castrum around us, killing more of Gaius's men than we could possibly count. But after a brief moment of protestation that is of no concern to him, he must find out who is stronger as our protection from Hydaelyn wanes. And finally, the Ascian La Brea. We still know so little about him or his kind. All he reveals is that the summoning of the primals and the use of the Ultima weapon drain Hydaelyn and sow chaos amongst the world, hastening the arrival of his dark god. We banish him from the body of Thancred with the power of light, classic JRPG, and barely escape with our lives thanks to Maggie, the Magitech Reaper. The world has been rid of the Ultima weapon, but danger still lurks, and the Empire has not been beaten back entirely. And so, the story continues, in the patch content, but I'll deal with that at another time. As I was playing through the main story, I was also leveling the classes on the side. I'll give you a 2-sentence thought on each, because if I went through them one by one, bit by bit, I'd be writing another novel on top of the one I've already written so far. Paladin. Aldous is a Chad, Jenlins is an idiot. Warrior. I love that they thought of a way to explain the stupidly big axes on a pirate ship. You never know what's around the bend, a big adventure or a brand new friend, when you're curious, like Curious George. Dragoon. Oh, that's just racism. Justinian is a twit. Monk. I really like the Jackie Chan nods, and he had the right spirit, I guess. Bard. Oh, that's more racism. Thank you. Gridania, and a moving tale about helping an old soldier find his peace. One of the only 3 I took seriously. Black Mage. Are these potatoes as autistic as I am, or is the writer stupid? No, Nolafels are just autistic. Okay. Summoner. Holy shit, video game. Where did this come from? Another one I took seriously. And where did Ishtola get her everything from? It clearly doesn't run in the family. Scholar, same as before, and what a good little guy. What a fucked up story. The last I took seriously. White Mage. Oh, she's gonna get somebody killed, isn't she? White magic. Ninja. Oh, you lovable bastard, Jack. And did they use sound effects from Naruto? Or am I imagining that? And with that, I'm done with The Realm Reborn.